Hello, Grimoire Club, and welcome to this Equinox inspired grimoire spread. Lots of you expressed interest in finding ways to get botanicals, to get plants into your book. So we're going to focus on a page that helps you incorporate botanicals as well as a pocket for all of your Equinox magic needs. So we're starting here. We're back in the Petite Grimoire. We're back in the Little Found book this month. And what I've done to begin is put just a very light coat of primer on my page to keep it from getting too wrinkly and wobbly. But I want to be able to see the text through the primer. So it's a very light coat. And then I'm just going over the top here with some bright, springy poster paint consistency acrylics to start creating our layers for the background. You could do this part with acrylics, you could do this part with watercolors or alcohol inks or a mix of whatever it is that you desire. I'm continuing with a little bit of this grassy green acrylic and a palette knife. I'll also use an old gift card for something like this as well. And using a hairdryer in between the steps. That's going to keep our colors really nice and bright for this spread. Sometimes working wet on wet can give you some really great subtle neutral colors, but for this, we want really poppy, vibrant colors. So we're going to dry in between our colors. And I love to use my fingers. It's one of my favorite tools. I think it literally and figuratively puts the artist in the work. You make your mark. So have fun, play with it, and finger paint. So our background is starting to look very festive, but I wanted to show you another way to add layers because that's something lots of you wrote to me with concern about. So let's talk about stencils. These are just alphabet stencils that I'm using acrylic paint on kind of a stiff brush. You could do this with either a stiff brush or a sponge. And for success with stencils, less paint is more. If you use too much paint with a stencil, you just get kind of gushy, indecipherable shapes, which can be cool. But for this particular look, we want something kind of transparent and light. And then I'm just going to draw, just freehand, just noodle and doodle on top of our colored layers. And you could do this with paint. You could do this with pastel or a great paint marker. So now we've got a background. Let's start looking at our pocket, this sun-shaped pocket. I think round things are always a little more interesting. So we're going to bring some of that Equinox magic in with a solar-shaped pocket. And this is a little bit of scrap paper, both for the back of the pocket and yellow for the front of the pocket. So you can see I just traced a roll of tape. You could trace anything round that you have to make two shapes that are similar and cut one in half. And those are going to be the basic parts of our pocket. And I decided I wanted to add a little bit of spring flair to this pocket by painting some little seedlings in this very sappy green. And we're going to dress up this yellow scrap with a lino cut stamp. This is a stamp that I made. You can skip this step, or you might wish to use a pattern paper to begin with, or you might like to use some text. I always think adding a little bit of texture really brings some special details to what you're working on. So I like to add stamps and prints and texture. You do you. So now we are making our rays, making some little beams for our sunshine. And first, we're going to create the pocket with a little bit of sewing. I'm going to use a bit of embroidery floss around the edge because I think that that's going to add an interesting texture, an interesting element to this pocket. But you could glue, you could use washi tape, whatever your heart desires. So that's a look at our pocket. And now it's time to add the sunbeams. I'm going to use just a little bit, apparently very gloppy rubber cement, and start adding the little radial sunbeams around the outside of our pocket. Lovely. One completed sun pocket. Now we're going to get to the botanical tag portion. This is just a regular old plastic sleeve protector. It's one that's actually a little beat up, so I'm going to recycle it to use for this project. And you can see here I have some of these great vintage. These are actually vintage. Some of them are lithographs and prints from old magazines, these flowers and plants. You could collage, like I'm going to, with existing images. You could use some cool retro ephemera. You could use pictures from magazines. Your botanicals could be something that you've drawn, something you've printed out, anything that works for the language of your book and what you like to do. So I'm going to create this tag using just a little bit of a guideline here that I've created. I know how large I want this window to be. So I'm going to use this little scrap tag to help me put my composition together. You'll see how this comes together. So I've got a little dyed coffee filter there. And I'm going to trace this little template onto the page protector with a permanent marker. And we're going to cut it out. I chose to use a corner because I thought it would make my life a little easier, but you do not have to. Use what you have. So as you can see, there's a little pocket for our collage to start fitting inside of. Now, one thing we want to consider is that you are going to be able to see this tag from both sides. So we're going to address both the front side you see now, as well as the back side. So I'm adding a little bit of stamped text here. These are some really fun squiggly letters. I got these at a Goodwill for I think 50 cents for the whole alphabet. Woohoo! Trashy witch. And I decided I would like to add a little bit of rune magic to our tag. So I'm just going to now start using just a little dippy dab of hot glue just to hold our items in place. There's quite a bit of static electricity here. So depending on how much stuff you want to put in your tag, it may just stay in there on its own. I'm going to add a little solar magic by adding some dried calendula petals to the inside of my tag. This could be a fun way for you to incorporate plant magic and herb magic into your book as well. This is a little doily that I've painted and cut up. And as you can see, this is our tag. I chose to sew my tag together. You can glue your tag together. You can tape it together. You could use brads to seal it. Use what you have. So as you can see now, we've addressed both sides of the tag. It looks good from the front and it looks good from the back. Now we're going to start working on the page it's going to live on. So this is the back side of the spread. So I chose to just put a little bit of this green and gold primer on it. And I'm gonna do a little schnoodly doodle here. Freehand some of these kind of fun swirly shapes. I'm feeling inspired by that little fairy playing card for something that feels fairy tale-like and enchanted. So as you can see, front and back page. So now it's time to get this tag incorporated and living on the page. So I'm going to use that same template shape and trace it onto our spread. And I'm going to go just a little bigger than the size of the actual or excuse me, I'm going to go a little smaller. I'm going to go a little smaller than the actual size of the tag because we don't want the tag to fall through. We want it to rest in this page like a frame. I hope that makes sense. So we're cutting out that center. And you can see that creates a frame and our tag fits in there quite snugly. And I'm going to attach this with just a little dib dab of hot glue. Again, you could use brads or some beautiful washi tape. Make sure that seal is secure. Wonderful. Now it's time to get our sun pocket situated. I decided to include more of that little painted doily so that there's some continuity between the page with the tag and the page with the sun. That repetition of pattern with the doily. And I wanted to include a little bit of text. So I'm using these big stamps, something springy. And my plan for this page is to hold on to little bits of my spring equinox rituals, some spring equinox recipes, some fun chants and poetry. So here I'm just using a little bit of spray adhesive, and this is just copy paper. Copy paper that I've added some stamps to. So there we go. We're looking bright, colorful. I have a few items I'm going to tuck into my sun. Some little bits where my poetry and ritual and recipes will go. I plan to work on them this week. And a little equinox tag. And here we have it. A very bold, beautiful, fun equinox spread. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, Grimoire Club, and that it helps stir up some ideas for creating magic in your own books. I want to thank you so much for being here and for being here with me on Patreon. Thank you. And until we speak again, witch on, witch boldly, and be well, my friends. Bye-bye.